What lies beneath a kiss? Many believe it's tenderness, affection, purity of feelings. Yet Nietzsche challenges us to look deeper. What if every gesture of love were also an assertion of power? The kiss, so celebrated as a symbol of union, might be seen as a field of invisible forces, where desire and dominance intertwine. This isn't about denying the beauty of intimacy, but recognizing the tension that exists in every human bond. After all, do we seek another because we love them, or because we wish to expand our influence over them? This question is uncomfortable, but it opens doors to understanding not just relationships, but the very nature of life itself. Nietzsche offers no easy answers. He dismantles illusions to reveal the rawness of instinct. Are you ready to see the kiss as never before? From early on, we learn to view the kiss as a gesture of purity. It appears in fairy tales as the key that awakens the sleeping princess, as the ultimate sign of true love, as the promise of a happily ever after. Culture has shaped our vision in such a way that we see in the kiss an unquestionable symbol of tenderness and surrender. But Nietzsche, with his deep distrust of human conventions, would invite us to distrust this gesture as well. For nothing that man does is purely innocent, and behind every expression of affection there always throbs the force of life, wanting to assert itself. The kiss, in this sense, can be understood as a mask. It presents itself as sweetness, but conceals currents of desire, conquest, and even dominion. Think about how often the first kiss in a relationship carries with it a weight of victory. Whoever kisses first has succeeded. There's a subtle game of power there, where it's not just about feeling, but about marking territory, inscribing oneself in the other's memory. This gesture, which seems so delicate, is at the same time an inscription of one's own will to exist and impose itself on the world. Nietzsche would alert us against the naivety of thinking the kiss merely as affection. For him, life is struggle, tension, expansion of forces. What we call love is no exception, but an expression of this same movement. When two lips meet, two wills to power also meet. It's not necessarily about violence, but about confrontation. The kiss is a clash of inner worlds that desire to assert themselves, conquer space, absorb the other into their orbit. It's not a passive gesture, but active, loaded with intentions we don't always recognize. This perspective might seem harsh, but it's profoundly liberating because it dismantles illusions. How many people don't suffer believing that love should be pure, crystalline, free of selfishness? On the contrary, Nietzsche invites us to accept that even in the most passionate kiss, there exists a foundation of interest, of ego, of appropriation. And far from devaluing the gesture, this makes it more human, more real. The kiss isn't a negation of life, but its affirmation in all its complexity. Observe couples on the street, in cafes, on dates. The public kiss is almost always a silent declaration. This person is mine, and I am theirs. It's not just about affection, but about delimiting boundaries. The gesture functions as a symbolic mark, similar to the animal that leaves its scent to assert territory. Of course, wrapped in aesthetics, in romance, in poetry, but the vital function is the same. Guarantee space, ensure presence, perpetuate one's own impulse of power. Nietzsche would never romanticize this scenario, but neither would he condemn it. He would simply show us that behind the mask of innocence exists the most fundamental movement of life, that of expansion. The kiss is, therefore, a microcosm of existence, a small act that reveals the great game of forces that move human beings. It's a simple, everyday gesture, but one that contains within itself the density of all Nietzschean philosophy about the will to power. We might even ask, if there were no belief in the purity of the kiss, would it still have the same value? Perhaps not. It's precisely the veil of innocence that makes it socially acceptable, desired, and idealized. But this veil, like every mask, is fragile. One need only look with more attentive eyes to perceive the cracks. The kiss that seems sweet may carry jealousy, insecurity, desire for possession. The kiss that seems romantic may be, in truth, a silent request for control. Nothing is as clean as culture makes us believe. Nietzsche invites us then to a look without illusions, a look that recognizes the kiss as an expression of forces in struggle and not as an untouched symbol of goodness. It's uncomfortable but necessary, because only when we see the raw truth behind the masks can we live more fully, more consciously, more honestly with our own nature. And perhaps, in this recognition, the kiss becomes even more intense. No longer as a farce of innocence, but as an assumedly human act, a clash of desires, of potencies, of lives that encounter each other. The kiss, therefore, is the mask of innocence. But under this mask pulses the true essence of what we are, beings who love, desire, and always want more from life. Nietzsche believed that life isn't guided by a search for pleasure or by a simple survival instinct, but by something deeper and fiercer, the will to power. This concept, so often misinterpreted, doesn't mean merely dominion over others, but the vital pulsation that moves us to expand, to grow, to overcome limits. It's the force that makes the plant stretch toward the sun, the animal hunt even without hunger, the artist create without guarantees of recognition. It's the impulse that pulls us from inertia and throws us into the flow of existence. When we think about human desire, and especially about amorous desire, we cannot disconnect it from this fundamental force. Every desire is, at bottom, an expression of the will to power. The kiss, in this context, ceases to be merely a gesture of tenderness to become an invisible battlefield. The desire that leads two people to kiss each other doesn't arise only from the search for physical pleasure or affection, but from a more intimate necessity: to expand oneself through the other, to inscribe oneself in the other's life, to project one's own potency in new directions. That's why desire is often restless, insatiable, almost violent in its intensity. It's not content to exist in itself. It needs to launch outward. It needs to find in the other a mirror and an extension. Nietzsche would remind us that there's no desire without appropriation. When we desire someone, we're saying, even if silently, I want you to be part of my vital territory. I want your energy to intertwine with mine. I want to absorb something from you. This isn't a pessimistic vision, but realistic. Love isn't just surrender, it's inevitably also possession. And the kiss is the seal of this process, the concrete way to manifest this appropriation. It's as if we were saying, I take you inside me, even if for an instant. If we observe well, we'll see that this logic repeats in everyday situations. When someone insists on conquering another person, even facing their indifference, what's at stake isn't just attraction, but the desire to assert oneself, to overcome resistance, to prove one's own potency. It's the will to power that manifests itself. The same occurs in long relationships. When desire remains alive, it doesn't content itself merely to exist. It constantly seeks new ways to expand, whether through touch, word, kiss. Each gesture carries this vital hunger that Nietzsche described so well. Many believe that desire is lack, that we love because something is missing from us. Nietzsche would distrust this idea. For him, desire doesn't arise from emptiness, but from excess. We desire because we have too much life in us, because we're overflowing with energy and need to launch this force outward. The kiss, then, isn't a patch for a lack, but explosion of an abundance. It's as if life were saying, I am so intense that I cannot remain contained. I need to spread myself. I need to unite with what surrounds me. This interpretation changes everything. Instead of seeing the kiss as a search for completeness, we can see it as affirmation of potency. When two people meet in a gesture of desire, they're not just supplying lacks, but putting into movement the excess of life that pulses within them. And in this clash, there's always a game of forces: who conducts, who surrenders, who dominates, who yields. There's no neutrality. The kiss is always a field of tensions. Nietzsche provokes us to accept this reality without fear, recognizing that desire is will to power doesn't diminish love, but makes it more truthful. For only when we understand the nature of this impulse can we live it without illusions, without guilt, without impossible expectations. Desire isn't the enemy of purity. It's the very expression of life in its most honest intensity. In perceiving this, we begin to see that each kiss is more than an exchange of affection. It's life in us wanting to assert itself, wanting to expand beyond its limits. It's the clash of two wills that meet, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict, but always moved by the same vital impulse. Desire, therefore, isn't something to be tamed or shamed, but something to be understood as an essential part of what we are. Thus, Nietzsche invites us to look at the kiss not as simple tenderness, but as the most intimate revelation of the will to power that inhabits us. And perhaps in accepting this, we can kiss with more intensity, with more consciousness, with more life. What we call affection is often merely the delicate form of subtle domination. Nietzsche had a sharp eye for life's disguises and would hardly let himself be fooled by the apparent sweetness of human gestures. The kiss, this symbol of affection and surrender, might be, in truth, an attempt at conquest, appropriation, control. The amorous gesture mixes with the will to power, and what seems like donation might be a demand for possession. Think about how many kisses come accompanied by jealousy. The lip that touches the other seems to say, "You are mine." Affection in this case isn't just expression of love, but imposition of limits, a way to mark presence. The kiss is like an invisible chain that binds the other to us. Of course, this chain is rarely recognized as such, since we've grown accustomed to thinking of affection as something pure. But Nietzsche alerts us. Behind softness dwells the hardness of life, and every human gesture, even the most tender, carries within it a desire for dominion. This domination is often unconscious. It's a force that escapes our control because it's rooted in life's very instinct. We love, desire, and care for the other, but amid this, we also seek to guarantee that they belong to us, that they submit to our vital space. The kiss is then an ambiguous act, simultaneously tenderness and appropriation, sweetness and dominion. It's a scene where love and power dance together without our being able to separate them clearly. Observe couples in silence after a kiss. Often, there's an implicit expectation: who will yield more, who will surrender more, who will assume the role of the led, and who will occupy the place of leader. Even in the softness of a gesture, there's a dispute of forces. Affection doesn't eliminate the power game. It merely clothes it in acceptable forms, making the struggle more discreet, but no less intense. Nietzsche didn't see this as something negative. On the contrary, he encouraged us to face this truth without moralisms. Life is will to power, and denying this is denying what we are. The kiss as domination disguised as affection shouldn't be seen as lie or manipulation, but as natural expression of vital movement. We don't kiss just to give, but also to mark, to inscribe our presence in the other. This act of marking is, in itself, a gesture of power. The danger, according to Nietzsche, isn't in recognizing this domination, but in denying it. When we believe that love is only purity, we create unreal expectations. We become frustrated before possession and end up living in illusion. But when we accept that affection and power walk side by side, we can live our relationships with more lucidity. It's not about transforming the kiss into a conscious battlefield, but about perceiving its ambivalence. It's both approximation and delimitation, both surrender and demand. See, for example, the reconciliation kiss after a fight. Often it's not just affection, but also a way to re-establish authority. Whoever gives the first kiss might be assuming the role of who decides the moment of forgiveness, of who dictates the end of tension. The gesture, apparently tender, is also a silent affirmation of power. I am the one who conducts the rhythm of the relationship. Even in forgiveness, there's force and appropriation. In reflecting on this, Nietzsche invites us to abandon naivety. The kiss isn't neutral. It carries intentions, forces and wills that cannot be ignored. To love is also to want to dominate. To care is also to want to imprison. To kiss is also to demand presence. Denying this ambiguity is living in fantasy. Assuming this truth is giving the kiss its real depth. It's recognizing that within it dwells life's essence, the struggle of forces that, even in silence, never stops pulsing. Therefore, each kiss is a theater of affection and power. What we see on the surface is tenderness, but what vibrates in the depths is the will to assert oneself, to leave a mark, to not allow the other to escape us. This is domination, disguised as affection, a gesture that, while caressing, also imprisons. Nietzsche never let himself be seduced by the sugary romanticism that so often shapes how we think about love. For him, romanticism was a useful invention, but illusory, a poetic veil thrown over life's crudest instincts. Romantic love, with its promises of eternity, absolute fidelity and unconditional purity, is a cultural construction that tries to soften the harder truth, that love is crossed by desire, appropriation, and will to power. And yet Nietzsche would recognize that this illusion is necessary, because without it, perhaps few could bear the raw intensity of existence. The kiss, within this logic, is one of the pillars of the romantic myth. It's not just a physical gesture, but a symbol of total union. In the collective imagination, the kiss seals pacts, resolves conflicts, consecrates loves. It's the moment when two people become one, as if there were a fusion of souls. But Nietzsche would smile ironically before this image, for in reality, there's no fusion. There's encounter of forces, clash of potencies, battle of desires. The kiss might seem like fusion, but it's only temporary approximation, always fragile, always precarious. The romantic illusion, however, fulfills a vital function. It gives form and beauty to that which otherwise might seem too brutal. If we saw love only as struggle, as appropriation, as power game, many would give up on it. The romantic myth softens pain, gives meaning to suffering, and creates hope that life together can save us from solitude. Even if it's a lie, it's a necessary lie, because life without veils might be unbearable for most. Nietzsche didn't preach that everyone should live without illusions, but that the strong should dare to face them. The more fragile, perhaps, would need to remain bound to the myth so as not to succumb to reality's weight. The kiss, then, becomes stage of this illusion. It's in the kiss that the promise of eternity concentrates, even knowing, deep down, that nothing is eternal. It's in the kiss that we seal commitments that often cannot be fulfilled, but that we need to believe in that instant will be. Romanticism transforms the gesture into ritual, into symbol of transcendence, and we, with our needs and hopes, participate in this theater, wishing it were true, even though we know, in some silent corner of the soul, that it isn't. Nietzsche wouldn't condemn this illusion completely. He would see it as life's anesthetic, as a human invention to make bearable that which without adornments would be too arid. Life needs veils, masks, beautiful stories that calm hearts. The problem arises when we confuse the veil with reality, when we believe that the myth is love's very essence and not just its clothing. At this point, we fall into frustrations, because life always takes care of tearing the veil, and what we find behind is raw and harder than we'd like. Romanticism tells us that the kiss is total surrender. Nietzsche would say it's a silent contract of possession. Romanticism whispers to us that love is eternal. Nietzsche would remind that everything is transitory, that nothing escapes the flow of change. Romanticism preaches that the other can complete us. Nietzsche, conversely, would insist that we are excess, not lack. That we love because we overflow with life, not because something is missing from us. Romanticism creates the illusion of soul fusion. Nietzsche shows us that what exists is dance, sometimes harmonious, sometimes conflicted, of two wills that never become one. This doesn't mean we should reject romanticism completely. On the contrary, Nietzsche invites us to laugh at it, to play with its illusions, to use it as poetry, but without letting it enslave us. The romantic kiss can continue to move us, as long as we know that behind it there's no transcendental magic, but human forces in movement. When we accept this ambivalence, we manage to love more lucidly, without expecting perfection, without demanding eternity, without being disappointed by impermanence. An everyday example can illustrate this. Think of the couple who kiss at the altar, promising love until death separates them. It's a moment loaded with symbolism, surrounded by music, gazes, and tears. Romanticism reaches its peak in this instant, but few years later that same kiss might transform into silence, distance, absence. This doesn't mean the love was false, but that life, with its unpredictability, broke the promise. The myth offered beauty and hope for a time, but couldn't resist the real. And it's there that Nietzsche calls us to mature. To love isn't to believe in eternity, but to live the intensity of the instant without illusions. Romantic love, therefore, is a necessary illusion. It gives us courage to dive into something that, without adornments, would seem brutal. But only when we dare to look beyond the myth can we truly love without fantasies. The kiss ceases to be just seal of an impossible promise and becomes celebration of life that pulses now in the present without guarantees. And perhaps it's precisely this consciousness that makes the gesture more beautiful, because it no longer depends on eternity, but on intensity. There are kisses born of tenderness, others of desire, but there also exist those that carry within themselves the seed of conflict. Nietzsche, in looking at love as field of forces, would make us perceive that the kiss can be, often, a silent form of war. Not a war of swords and blood, but of wills, of egos, of potencies that meet and don't know whether to harmonize or devour each other. The gesture that seems union might be in its depth a battle for supremacy. Who has never lived the experience of a kiss where, instead of surrender, there was tension, where each tried to conduct, dominate, mark the rhythm? This game needs no words to exist. The lips say what the mouth silences. I want you to bend to my desire. It's in this instant that the kiss reveals its warlike face. It ceases to be just tenderness and becomes dispute. And this dispute, far from being exception, is an inevitable part of human encounter, since each being is, for Nietzsche, an affirmation of life that wants to expand over the other. Jealousy is one of the clearest scenarios where the kiss transforms into war. When someone kisses their partner in public intensely, sometimes the gesture carries more demonstration than affection. It's as if it said, "Look everyone, this person belongs to me." Tenderness in this case is also a warning. The kiss, which should be intimate, becomes raised flag, exhibited conquest, possession trophy. Conflict isn't just within the relationship, but also against others' gaze, as if it were necessary to reaffirm constantly who dominates and who is dominated. Nietzsche saw in this not morality, but inevitability. Life is struggle of forces, and no human gesture escapes this law. The kiss, being expression of desire, couldn't be neutral. Behind its softness, there's always the risk of battle. It's not about explicit violence, but about subtle war of affections, who yields, who resists, who imposes, who lets themselves be carried away. In every kiss exists a field of power in dispute, even if those involved don't perceive it consciously. An even more intimate example is the kiss after an argument. When a couple, after fighting, kisses, this gesture is rarely just reconciliation. Often it's the victory of one side, which with this act seals the end of conflict, imposing its own version of forgiveness. The kiss functions as symbolic signature of who, in that instant, won the silent battle. The other, in accepting it, recognizes the authority of whoever conducted the gesture. Forgiveness, then, isn't equality, but hierarchy masked as affection. Nietzsche invites us to face this reality without fear, because instead of weakening the kiss's value, recognizing it as war makes it deeper. It ceases to be just poetry and reveals itself as a vital act, full of intensity. What's more human than fighting and loving at the same time? The kiss is precisely this paradoxical fusion. Tenderness and conflict, affection and dispute, union and domination. It's in this paradox that its force resides. And if we think well, perhaps it's precisely this war dimension that makes the kiss so fascinating. If it were only sweetness, perhaps it wouldn't mark us so much. What binds us, what consumes us, is this mixture of surrender and combat. When we kiss, we surrender something of ourselves, but also demand something from the other. It's a dance where no one comes out unscathed. There are always marks left, whether of affection or power. It's this ambiguity that makes the kiss not just romantic gesture, but existential experience. Nietzsche would say that living without this confrontation is living without intensity. The kiss that becomes war is the maximum expression of life as tension, as clash of forces that meet and challenge each other. We shouldn't fear this war, but welcome it as inevitable part of love, because to love for him was never an act of absolute peace, but a battle where life affirms itself in its potency. Thus, when the kiss becomes war, it doesn't mean love ended, but that it's alive in its most authentic form, as encounter of two forces that, instead of cancelling each other, prefer to clash, to provoke, to challenge each other. To love is also to fight. And the kiss is the field where this fight unfolds in silence, with lips that touch, but at the same time dispute who in fact conducts the destiny of that instant. Nietzsche taught us to look at life not with eyes of negation, but with courage to affirm even what is hard, conflicted and cruel. He believed that human greatness lies in saying yes to life in its totality, without seeking anesthetics, without hiding behind comfortable illusions. The kiss, within this perspective, can be understood as one of the most powerful symbols of this affirmation. For despite being mask, dominion and even war, it's, above all, expression of vitality that pulses in us. To kiss is to live with intensity. When two people meet in a kiss, they're not just sharing affection. They're silently shouting, "Life is now, and I want it with all force." The kiss is the instant when the body refuses to be just spectator of the world and launches outward, seeking to touch and be touched. It's proof that we weren't born for isolation, but for exchange, for risk, for encounter. In this sense, the kiss is more than an intimate gesture. It's celebration of excess of life that overflows from us. Nietzsche insisted that life is expansion, overcoming of itself, constant creation. The kiss can be seen as a small form of creation, an act by which two existences intertwine and even if, for instance, produce something new. It's not just contact of bodies, but mixture of worlds, clash of histories, fusion of desires that, however fleeting it may be, generates intensity. And this intensity is, for Nietzsche, the measure of a life worth living. Many seek in the kiss a promise of eternity, but perhaps its beauty lies precisely in the opposite, in its transitoriness. It lasts seconds, but can mark an entire life. It's a gesture that cannot be saved, cannot be accumulated, cannot be repeated in the same way. Each kiss is unique, unrepeatable, ephemeral, and at the same time it's infinite in memory and sensation it leaves. It reminds us that life's value doesn't lie in what lasts forever, but in what explodes with intensity in the present. Therefore, Nietzsche would see in the kiss not just the power game, but also the purest affirmation of life that asks for no justifications. When we kiss, we don't need reasons, logic, moral explanations. We kiss because life in us is too much to remain contained. The gesture is, in itself, its own justification. It's a yes to life that expresses itself in contact, in warmth, in proximity. In this instant, we don't think of future or past. We just live the now in its most radical form. Of course, the kiss carries domination, masks and wars, as we've seen in previous chapters. But precisely because of this, it's a mirror of life itself, contradictory, ambiguous, made of tenderness and violence, surrender and selfishness, love and power. Greatness lies in not denying any of these faces, but in embracing all of them as part of the same vital movement. The kiss, when seen thus, ceases to be just a cultural or romantic gesture and becomes existential symbol. Life in its multiplicity, affirmed in a single instant. Nietzsche would invite us to live each kiss as we live the life he so exalted. Without fear, without paralyzing illusions, without demand for eternity. To kiss isn't to promise forever, but to intensely affirm the now. It's an act that needs no external justifications because it already contains within itself all beauty and all brutality of existence. It's life saying, I am strong enough to launch myself to encounter, even knowing it's fleeting, even knowing I might lose, even knowing it might hurt. Thus, the kiss's affirmation of life is also invitation to courage, courage to love without guarantees, to desire without shame, to launch oneself without fear of failure. For Nietzsche, to live is to risk oneself. It's to embrace chaos and transform it into dance. The kiss is one of these dances, brief, intense, unpredictable, a way of saying yes to what is uncertain, of embracing life's flow without demanding that it be eternal or perfect. In the end, each kiss is a microcosm of Nietzschean philosophy, its force, its struggle, its mask, its war, but it's also creation, celebration, and affirmation. It's the instant when we say yes to life, not in words, but in flesh, in desire, in intensity. And it's because of this that despite its contradictions, the kiss continues being one of the most human and most beautiful gestures. Because it reminds us each time that to live is to launch oneself, it's to risk, it's to create, and above all, it's to affirm. Throughout this journey, we've seen how Nietzsche invites us to look at the kiss with different eyes. It's not just affection, nor only tenderness. It's mask that hides intentions. It's field of disguised domination. It's silent war between egos. It's romantic illusion that sustains hopes. But above all, it's affirmation of life. An instant when two existences meet and say yes to the intensity of the present. The kiss, just like life, is contradictory. It can be sweetness and violence, surrender and appropriation, promise and disillusion. And perhaps it's precisely in this mixture that its beauty resides. Nietzsche shows us that we don't need to flee these contradictions, but embrace them, because it's in them that life pulses in its truest form. Now I ask you, what was the kiss that most marked your life? That one which revealed not just love, but also power, conflict or intensity? Share in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know the strength of this community that seeks to reflect on life in a deep and courageous way. If this content touched you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and keep following our next reflections. Thank you so much for being here. It's your presence that makes this philosophical journey even more alive and transformative.